What if I told you this mountain playground is 6 times larger than Switzerland? Colorado's Rockies are home to more than 1,000 peaks, 2,850 lakes, and 9,600 miles of streams. A scale that's hard to grasp until you see it for yourself. In Colorado, the mountains are inescapable. The towering peaks of the Rocky Mountains are the most highly concentrated here in the Centennial State, making it a permanently popular destination with travelers seeking adventure, winter sports, and wildlife watching opportunities. Discover the other side of Colorado, however, in Old West Town's desert scenery and thriving 21st century cities. Hike, kayak, or bike your way through the national park. Numerous adventure sports options are available for thrill seekers, although it's equally possible to spend sedate days fishing or strolling into spectacular wilderness. Watch for moose roaming the landscape and bring your camera for shots of crystalline lakes set against dramatic peaks. Return to Colorado in winter for a range of exhilarating winter sports. Resort towns such as Aspen and Vail offer direct access to the slopes, where you can ski and snowboard down trails that suit all abilities. Visit Colorado at any time of year for a thrilling experience of its beautiful scenery. The content of this video is compiled from various sources. Please leave a comment below if you find any inaccuracies. These rocks started as sand. Around 280 million years ago, a desert the size of the Sahara covered this part of Colorado, and those dunes compressed over time into the red sandstone fins standing here today. Then, about 65 million years ago, the forces that built the Rockies tilted everything vertical, rotating what had been flat Earth into walls of stone that now rise over 300 feet straight up. The red comes from iron oxide, essentially rust locked into the grain of the rock itself. Behind the formations, Pikes Peak climbs to 14,115 feet, its snow-capped summit visible from almost anywhere in the park. For thousands of years, the Ute and many other native tribes treated this place as sacred ground. According to oral tradition, rival tribes would set their weapons down when they entered because no one fought here. In 1859, a railroad surveyor named Rufus Cable stood at the base of these spires and called it a fit place for the gods to assemble. The name has never changed. The park covers 1,341 acres, sits at 6,400 feet above sea level, and was designated a National Natural Landmark in 1971. In 1909, the family of a railroad magnate gave the land to the city of Colorado Springs on one condition: it would remain free to the public permanently. That condition still holds. Today, more than 2 million people visit each year, some to climb the formations, some to hike the 21 miles of trails, some just to stand at the base of a 300-foot wall of ancient stone and try to take it in. Before we head to the next spot, here's a fun question. What is the capital city of Colorado? Comment your answer. The canyon walls here drop nearly 2,500 feet from mesa to valley floor, and a 2-lane road runs right along the edge for 23 miles. This is Colorado National Monument, 20,500 acres of carved sandstone west of Grand Junction, established in 1911 and still largely unknown outside the region. The rocks at the base of these canyons are nearly 1.7 billion years old. The massive red walls above them, the Wingate Formation, were deposited hundreds of millions of years later as desert sands, then uplifted and split open by faulting as the Colorado Plateau rose. Independence Monument, the park's most recognizable spire, stands 450 feet tall on the floor of Monument Canyon. For centuries, the Fremont people farmed and hunted in these canyons until around AD 1250, followed by the Ute, who knew this landscape as well as anyone ever would. The man who made the monument federal land was a canyon dweller named John Otto, who first arrived in the early 1900s, carved the earliest trails by hand, and spent 16 years living in a tent in the park, earning exactly $1 a month as its first ranger. He called it the heart of the world. The road along the rim, Rimrock Drive, was his idea too, though it took until 1950 to complete. Crews cut 23 miles of pavement through solid sandstone with 19 overlooks that look west across the desert and east toward Grand Mesa, the largest flat-topped mountain on Earth. Today, more than 400,000 visitors a year drive it. Most of them pass through in a single afternoon, which is exactly what Otto spent his life trying to prevent. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our interesting videos. The Ute people call this mountain Cold Woman. They believed its permanent shroud of clouds was the source of bad weather across the valley, and from the way it buries itself in snow each winter, they weren't wrong. Snowmass receives around 300 inches of snowfall a year, accumulating on a mountain that drops 4,406 feet from summit to base, the longest lift-access vertical in the United States. The summit reaches 12,510 feet. The longest run, Long Shot, runs 5.3 miles from top to bottom. None of this existed until December 1967, when a developer named William Jantz opened a ski area on what had been a collection of cattle and sheep ranches in Brush Creek Valley. 9 months of construction. 5 chairlifts. Lift tickets at $6.50 a day. The idea was to build an alpine-style village, ski in and ski out, with the mountain as the centerpiece, something that hadn't really been done in Colorado before. It worked. Snowmass now covers 3,362 acres of skiable terrain across 94 trails, served by 16 lifts. 95% of the lodging sits directly on the slopes. 9 miles up the valley, Aspen has the name Recognition. But Snowmass has the mountain, and most skiers who know both would tell you that matters more. We worked really hard to make these videos, and of course, your support is a huge motivation. If you love us, you can scan the QR code here to buy us a cup of coffee. Crested Butte sits at nearly 9,000 feet in the Elk Mountains, deep enough into the Colorado Rockies that it missed the main highway and never became the resort town it might have been elsewhere. That distance is the thing that saved it. The town incorporated in 1880. Built on coal mining that sustained it for the better part of a century. When the coal was gone, the mountain stayed. In 1972, the town passed an ordinance making the entire downtown a historic district. One of the reasons the Victorian storefronts still line the main street today, painted in the same colours as when the miners left. The Colorado General Assembly named it the Wildflower Capital of Colorado in 1990. Every summer, the meadows around town turn into something that looks painted. Columbines, lupines, paintbrush, flooding every valley and hillside through July and August. Then in fall, the aspens take over, blanketing the slopes in orange and gold. In winter, the same slopes feed one of the most demanding ski mountains in the country. The resort covers 1,547 acres, drops 2,775 vertical feet from a 12,162-foot summit, and dedicates 37% of its terrain to expert runs. Average annual snowfall sits around 236 inches. Crested Butte has a reputation among serious skiers, not because it markets itself aggressively, but because those who find it keep coming back. At 11,990 feet, Loveland Pass sits on the Continental Divide, the line that splits North America's water between oceans, sending rain to the Pacific on one side and the Atlantic on the other. The road over it, US Highway 6, was nothing more than a wagon trail until 1954, when it was finally paved. The first automobile crossed on September 29th, 1929, on a dirt road barely wide enough to turn around on. For decades, this winding two-lane highway with its 6.7% grade and hairpin switchbacks was the only way to get from Denver to the western slope of Colorado. Then, on March 8, 1973, the Eisenhower Tunnel opened underneath the mountain. 1.7 miles of drilled granite, running 800 feet below the pass, now the highest vehicular tunnel in the world at 11,155 feet. Almost overnight, Loveland Pass went from necessity to detour. Today, most traffic disappears into the tunnel and never sees any of this. Trucks carrying hazardous materials and anything taller than 13 feet 11 inches still can't use the tunnel. They have to come up here regardless of season, regardless of weather. So do the backcountry skiers, the cyclists, and anyone willing to trade 9 miles of highway for the view from the top of the divide. Above treeline, the road keeps climbing until there's nothing but ridge and sky. The pass is still open year-round, still running through one of the most exposed stretches of road in the Rocky Mountains. If you've been here before, comment number 1. If not, comment number 4. Estes Park sits at 7,522 feet in a broad mountain valley surrounded on all sides by the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains. The Big Thompson River runs through the center of town, and Lake Estes, a reservoir just east of downtown, stretches nearly 2 miles along the valley floor. To the west, Rocky Mountain National Park begins almost immediately at the edge of town. The park covers 415 square miles with more than 60 peaks rising above 12,000 feet, and Long's Peak reaching 14,259 feet at the summit. In 2024, over 4 million people passed through the park's gates, most of them entering from Estes Park. The town itself has a permanent population of just over 1,600 people. Summer brings elk into the meadows and valleys, sometimes wandering into town in the early morning hours. Fall turns the aspen groves gold, and winter buries the whole valley under feet of snow, while the peaks above disappear into cloud. Trail Ridge Road, which climbs to 12,183 feet inside the park, is the highest continuously paved road in the United States. It closes in winter when the snowpack makes it impassable, and reopens each spring as one of the most dramatic drives in the country. Estes Park is 65 miles northwest of Denver, close enough to reach in a day, far enough into the mountains to feel like a different world entirely. Berthoud Pass crosses the Continental Divide at 11,307 feet on US Highway 40, about 55 miles west of Denver. The road climbs out of Empire through dense spruce and pine forest, switchbacks roughly a dozen times, and arrives at a summit where the trees disappear and the ridgeline stretches open in every direction. When it was paved in 1938, it became the first paved highway in Colorado to cross the Continental Divide. The grade runs at 6.3% on both sides, steep enough to earn a reputation as one of the more demanding drives in the state, particularly in winter when snowfall is heavy and the turns come fast. At the summit, the Continental Divide Trail crosses the highway. There's the same ridgeline, two different ways to travel it. Berthoud Pass also has a long history as a backcountry ski zone. A ski area operated here from 1937 until it closed in 2003. And the terrain is still open to anyone willing to hike or park at the summit and ride down. No lifts, no ticket, no lodge. The pass connects the Front Range to Grand County, giving drivers direct access to Winter Park without going through the Eisenhower Tunnel. In winter, the mountain closes in on both sides of the road, and the forest carries enough snow to bend branches low over the shoulders of the highway. Which region are you curious about? Let us know in the comments. We'll see you there in the next video. Mount Blue Sky, renamed in September 2023 from Mount Evans, west of Denver. At the request of the Southern Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes, whose name for themselves translates as the Blue Sky People, rises to 14,264 feet in the Front Range of the Rockies, about 60 miles. The summit is visible from over 100 miles to the east, dominating the western skyline of the Great Plains. A paved road climbs from 10,650 feet at Echo Lake all the way to 14,140 feet near the top. 28 miles long, gaining over 7,000 feet, the highest paved road in North America. At 12,830 feet, Summit Lake sits inside a glacial cirque, its surface reflecting the bare ridgeline above. The bristlecone pines at Mount Goliath Natural Area, a few miles below the summit, include specimens that have been standing since 403 AD, some of the oldest living organisms in Colorado. Above the trees, the terrain is pure tundra, bare rock, lichen, sparse alpine plants that survive temperatures and wind speeds few other places on Earth sustain. Mountain goats and bighorn sheep graze at the edges of the road. Snow can fall on the summit in any month of the year, which is why the road only opens from Memorial Day to Labor Day. It is the 12th highest peak in Colorado, but the easiest 14er in the state to stand on top of. Castle Rock sits at 6,224 feet on I-25, exactly halfway between Denver and Colorado Springs, 30 miles from one, 40 from the other. The butte that gives the town its name rises to 6,590 feet above the valley floor, a flat-top formation of rhyolite hard enough to resist the erosion that wore everything around it away. A miner named David Kellogg first named it in 1858, and it has been the town's defining feature ever since. The town was founded in 1874, built on rhyolite quarrying and a Denver and Rio Grande Railway depot, and became the county seat of Douglas County. Today, it's the most populous town, not city, in the entire state of Colorado. The population crossed 87,000 by 2025, having grown more than 50% in the single decade between 2010 and 2020. I-25 runs directly through town, and on clear days, Pikes Peak is visible to the south. The open space surrounding Castle Rock covers more than 6,900 acres, with 136 miles of trails threading through the hills and creek drainages. Every November, a large illuminated star goes up on top of the rock to mark the start of the Christmas season. On the 4th of July, fireworks launch from the same summit. The rock is always there, above the rooftops, above the highway interchange, above the downtown streets. Everything else in this town has changed considerably over the past 2 decades. The rock hasn't moved. The Black Canyon of the Gunnison doesn't announce itself. The ground is flat, the scrub is low, and then the edge arrives, and 2,000 feet of near vertical wall drops straight down to a river you can barely see. Parts of the gorge are so narrow that the floor measures only 40 feet across at the narrows, while the walls on either side rise more than half a mile. In many places, the canyon is deeper than it is wide. The darkest sections receive just 33 minutes of direct sunlight per day. The Gunnison River carved all of this through Precambrian gneiss and schist, some of the oldest exposed rock in North America, formed nearly 2 billion years ago, dropping an average of 34 feet for every mile it travels through the canyon, making it the 5th steepest mountain river descent on the continent. At Chasm View, that drop reaches 240 feet per mile. For comparison, the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon falls an average of just 7.5 feet per mile. Black Canyon was designated a national monument in 1933 and became a national park in 1999. The park covers 30,750 acres, though the canyon itself extends well beyond the park boundaries for a total of 48 miles. Only about 357,000 people visited in 2023, far fewer than most national parks in the American West. The place earns its name not from the color of its rock, but from the darkness that fills it. Two rivers meet here, the Colorado and the Roaring Fork, and the land between them has been a destination for a very long time. Long before the first settlers arrived, the Ute people came to these geothermal springs to heal. When the railroad reached town in 1885, it brought a different crowd. Wealthy visitors from the East Coast and Europe, drawn by the same waters. The hot springs pool that opened in 1888 measured 615 feet long, a world record at the time, built on a river island that builders first had to drain. In 1905, President Theodore Roosevelt used the Hotel Colorado as his base camp for a 2-week hunting trip, which locals still call the Western White House era. Behind the town, Glenwood Canyon cuts through the rock for 12.5 miles, with walls rising 1,300 feet above the Colorado River below. Engineers spent 12 years threading Interstate 70 through that canyon at a cost of roughly $490 million. The river that carved it is still running through it, loud and fast enough that you can hear it from the highway. At night, the town quiets down but doesn't go dark. Restaurants line Grand Avenue and the lights stay on later than most mountain towns. Glenwood Springs has been through gold rushes, world wars and floods, and it keeps showing up looking exactly like this. The Elk Mountains don't ease you in. They drop straight down to a valley floor at nearly 8,000 feet, and Aspen sits right at the bottom of that fall. From the air in autumn, the town nearly disappears under a canopy of gold, every aspen tree turning at once. It started as a silver mining camp in 1879, and within a decade it was one of the wealthiest towns in Colorado. The silver crash of 1893 emptied it almost overnight. Population fell from 12,000 to a few hundred. It stayed quiet for half a century until a group of investors looked at the mountain above town and saw something different. In 1950, Aspen Mountain opened its first ski lift, and that same year the town hosted the FIS Alpine World Ski Championships. A remarkable bet that paid off. The Silver Queen gondola now climbs 3,267 vertical feet from the edge of downtown to the summit in about 13 minutes. There are 4 separate ski mountains here: Aspen Mountain, Aspen Highlands, Buttermilk, and Snowmass, spread across more than 5,500 acres of terrain. Snowmass sits 8 miles away in its own valley, big enough to feel like a separate resort entirely. In winter, the whole landscape compresses into a single white system. Runs, trees, lodges, lifts, all woven together across the ridge lines. Summer reads completely differently. Green trails replace the ski runs, and the mountain biking and hiking pull a different crowd. The Rockies don't announce themselves from the plains. They simply appear on the horizon. A wall of white rising out of flat farmland without any transition. Rocky Mountain National Park was established in 1915, and at 265,000 acres, it contains 77 peaks above 12,000 feet. Long's Peak, the highest, tops out at 14,259 feet, a summit that sees snow in every month of the year. The Continental Divide cuts straight through the middle of the park, splitting water east toward the Atlantic and west toward the Pacific. Trail Ridge Road crosses that divide at 12,183 feet, making it the highest continuous paved road in the United States, above tree line for most of its length. Up there, the landscape stops being a forest and becomes something closer to Arctic tundra, where low-growing plants spend decades producing a single bloom. Below treeline, about 3,000 elk move through the park year-round, one of the largest herds in the country. In autumn, the bulls bugle across the valleys at night, a sound that carries farther than you'd expect. The east side of the park drops into Estes Park, a small town that has been the gateway since before the park existed. The west side opens into the Kawuniche Valley, where the Colorado River begins, still narrow enough here to step across in places. More than 300 miles of trails branch out from both sides, from easy lakeside walks to technical alpine routes that require crampons in any season. The turquoise alpine lakes scattered across the high terrain get their colour from glacial rock flour suspended in the water, not from depth or sky reflection. Around 3 million people visit every year, which means the park has learned to hold both solitude and crowds. A cluster of mountains rises so high and so close together that the effect is almost architectural. These are the Collegiate Peaks, named in 1869 by Harvard geology students who looked up from the Arkansas River Valley and decided the summits deserved something more than numbers. Mount Harvard reaches 14,420 feet, the highest of the group and the third tallest peak in all of Colorado. Mount Yale, Mount Columbia, and Mount Oxford follow close behind, each one a separate climb, a separate character. Together, they sit inside a 166,938-acre wilderness managed by the US Forest Service, where no roads go and no motors are allowed. The Sawatch Range that holds them contains more 14ers than any other mountain range in the state, and the Collegiate Peaks are its most concentrated expression. From the valley floor, the scale is hard to process. The peaks rise 6,000 feet above the town of Buena Vista in under 4 horizontal miles. Up close, the rock tells a different story. Iron-stained reds and burnt oranges mixed into the grey granite, the result of minerals leaching through cracks over millions of years. The cirques carved by glaciers hold small lakes that don't appear on most maps, sitting in pockets of bare stone below the ridge lines. By midsummer, the snowfields still cling to the north-facing couloirs, months after the valley below has dried out. The Front Range is where the Great Plains run out of room. One moment it's flat in every direction, then the Rockies appear, abrupt and enormous, with no foothills to soften the approach. Denver sits at the base of that wall at exactly 5,280 feet, earning the nickname Mile High City in a way that's literally true to the inch. The city was founded in 1858 when gold prospectors pushed into the mountains, and what started as a supply camp grew into the most populous city between Kansas City and Los Angeles. Above Boulder, the Flatirons lean out of the hillside at a steep angle. Tilted sandstone slabs laid down roughly 300 million years ago, now pressed vertical by the same tectonic forces that built the Rockies. In winter, the contrast between the two landscapes sharpens. The plains hold a dusting of snow, while the peaks behind them carry several feet. Warm, dry Chinook winds come off the mountains with enough force to raise temperatures on the plains by 40 degrees Fahrenheit in a matter of hours, turning a January afternoon into something that feels like March. The Front Range urban corridor runs from Fort Collins in the north to Pueblo in the south. More than 80% of Colorado's population living in this single, narrow strip between flatland and mountain. At sunset, the light moves east off the peaks and spreads across the plains in one long, slow exhaust. Boulder sits where the Great Plains meet the Rocky Mountains, and the city has never been able to decide which one it belongs to. The Flatirons, 5 tilted slabs of sandstone pressed up at a steep angle by the same forces that built the Rockies, define the western skyline so completely that locals navigate by them without thinking. The rock is roughly 300 million years old, laid down as river sediment long before the mountains existed, then tilted vertical when the range pushed up beneath it. The University of Colorado was founded here in 1876. The same year, Colorado became a state, and its red tile roofed campus now enrolls around 35,000 students. From the air, the campus reads as its own small city. Red sandstone buildings, organised around lawns and plazas, with the Flatirons rising directly behind. Boulder Creek cuts through the middle of town, and on any warm afternoon, the banks are crowded. The city has protected roughly 45,000 acres of open space around its borders, which is why the view from downtown looks almost the same as it did 50 years ago. Mountains close, development held back. Denver sits at exactly 5,280 feet above sea level, 1 mile high to the inch. And the city has been reminding people of that fact since before it had paved streets. It started in 1858 as a supply camp for gold prospectors pushing into the Rockies, and within a generation, it had grown into the largest city between the Mississippi and the Pacific coast. The Colorado state capitol stands near the center of it all, its dome covered in 24-karat gold leaf, a detail that made sense in a state that was built on precious metals. Union Station has been the city's front door since 1881, and its renovation in 2014 turned the old Beaux-Arts building into something that works again. Restaurants, a hotel, commuter rail, people moving through it all day. The 16th Street Mall runs 1.25 miles through downtown, a pedestrian corridor designed by I.M. Pei that opened in 1982 and still anchors the city's street life. Lodo, lower downtown, is where the Gold Rush brick survived longest. Victorian warehouses now holding bars and restaurants that run late. The Brown Palace Hotel has been operating since 1892 in the same red Colorado sandstone building, 8 stories wrapped around an atrium that hasn't been substantially changed. The Navarre, built in 1884 across the street, is one of the oldest commercial structures still standing downtown, now dwarfed by glass towers on every side. The Denver Art Museum's angular titanium expansion, designed by Daniel Libeskind and opened in 2006, cuts a sharp contrast against all of it. From the air, the city reads as a dense grid that simply stops at the mountains to the west and dissolves into plains to the east. The Rockies are visible from downtown on most days, not as a backdrop but as a constant presence, close enough to feel like part of the city. Breckenridge sits at 9,600 feet in the Blue River Valley, high enough that the tree line is already close and the air is noticeably thin before you've done anything. The town was founded in 1859 when gold prospectors moved into Summit County, and it shows Victorian storefronts still line Main Street, painted in colours that stand out harder against the snow. The ski resort came a century later, opening in 1961, on what was then a mostly forgotten mining mountain. It has since grown across 5 peaks and nearly 2,900 acres of skiable terrain, with a vertical drop of 3,398 feet from the upper ridgeline down to the base village. Peak 8's rounded summit dome reaches 12,998 feet, and the Continental Divide forms the western edge of the ski area, meaning some of the runs begin where snowmelt flows toward the Pacific. From the valley floor in winter, the scale of it is hard to absorb. 5 peaks side by side, each one striped with runs, all of it visible at once above the town rooftops. The base village and the historic district sit within walking distance of each other, which is unusual for a resort this size. Most places this developed have lost the connection between town and mountain. Main Street operates on 2 tracks simultaneously. Victorian brick and board buildings from the 1880s selling lift tickets and coffee to people in ski boots. In summer, the runs go green and the mountain bike trails open, and Breckenridge reads completely differently, quieter, slower, still high. Colorado is the kind of place that awakens a sense of possibility, where every mountain pass seems to lead to a new adventure. The landscape shifts dramatically between towering peaks, high deserts, alpine lakes, and forests that stretch toward the horizon. There's an energy here that comes from living close to nature, where outdoor exploration is woven into everyday life. Whether you're chasing sunrise on a mountain trail or watching the last light fade over a valley, the moments feel remarkably vivid. Long after the trip is over, Colorado remains in your mind as a place defined not by a single attraction, but by the feeling of freedom it inspires.